screen here. Okay, it's saying it's recording. All right, desktop number 2, there we are. All right, can you guys still see my desktop again? And it's this diagram here with a square in it. Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. All right, so I'll record this because this is part of the recording you guys can see, so you can go back and listen to the explanation if you need it. But let's just talk about the steps that we're going to do in Rhino here in just a few minutes, right? First thing we're going to do is we're going to open up Rhino. We're going to take a look at the interface. We're going to talk about that for a few minutes. Then we're going to move right on. We're going to make sure that we set our units to feet, okay? Because we're going to start drawing in feet. Okay, you can set your units in your modeling softwares to, you're working, outside the United States to metric units, millimeters, centimeters, meters, or imperial units here in the United States, feet and inches. And we'll talk about how to do that. And we'll start by drawing 4 40-foot by 40-foot squares. So we'll actually, in the virtual environment, we'll tell it each unit is 1 foot, and then we'll start to draw things as if they're actually at full scale. So 40-foot squares, interestingly enough. Okay, and we'll carefully draft the template shown in the diagram below. Right, so here's a 40-foot by 40-foot square. Right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to draw these shapes inside the squares. Okay. We're going to use those to subdivide each square into 2 parts, right? So there'll be a part here in the gray and then a part here in the white, part here in the white, part here in the gray, on and on. So we'll sort of, again, cut these squares into these sort of odd shapes that resemble L's and C's and O's and T's. And even a P here, that's interesting. Then we'll take some of those shapes and we'll start to subdivide them further. Okay. Again, so this is very much like a recipe. Here's step 1, here's the ingredients, here's step 1, here's step 2. Cut these, add those, pull these apart. Okay, now, etc. Okay. All right. So you'll take one of these panels, you'll cut it into 2 additional pieces. Where you do that is up to you, right? You'll cut this one into 3 additional pieces, this one into 4, this one also into 2. Okay. If performed correctly, and I've shown my example here where I cut these, you'll have 15 planar parts to use. Next, we'll lay them all out like this flat, and then we'll extrude them to make them into solids. Okay. Up until then, we'll have been, we'll have just been drawing these shapes with curves, like the outlines, like with lines. So what we'll do is we'll actually extrude these and make them into actual solids, right? Give them thickness, actually have surfaces. And then we'll have those parts. They almost look like these corresponding models that I used to have students do at a foam core, right? So this is 1/8" foam core. But you'll essentially try to put one of these models together. So you'll take these components and you'll start to move them, rotate them, lock them together in order to reassemble them using at least 12. Make a spatial composition, right? That fits within an imagined 60-foot by 60-foot by 60-foot cube, right? So we'll model a cube in Rhino just so we can start to understand that sort of envelope that we're working within. And then you can start to move things in place, and you'll have to rotate some things up because they'll all be sitting flat on the XY plane. We'll start to rotate some of them vertically and lock them in, and we'll start to talk about object snaps and how to move things and rotate them in 90-degree increments, etc. Okay. You'll have to come and touch at least 3 of those edges of the cube, and you'll need to at least be able to sort of show or talk about when we come back together for your first model tomorrow. We'll be able to sort of like look inside, and you can rotate it around on your screen while we look at it and sort of talk about 3 distinct spaces within, right? So this is kind of an interesting take. You can see everybody starts with the exact same rules and the exact same ingredients. And by the end, they come up with different results, okay? All right, and then last, what we're gonna do is we're gonna find the most interesting view 3-dimensionally and export an isometric drawing, an axon drawing. Okay, so that's the workflow I'll be going through this morning with you over in Rhino. Okay, let's talk just a little bit about this, and again, we can touch on this again before we leave today. But your model will be assessed by the following criteria. Well, first of all, let me back up. Let's go to the schedule and workflow. That seems a little better. So we're going to do this demonstration today, and then I'll sit back and we'll just do it over and over again. You can follow along as you need to, right? Your assignment between today and tomorrow morning will be to create one model, okay, using this workflow, all right? And again, what we can do on tomorrow is everybody can just share their screen and we can just look at them in Rhino together, okay? All right, you'll get some feedback from me, okay, based on some of the things, the qualities that we're looking at in the rubric here up above, okay? But between now and Thursday, right, that's all I'm asking for is you go through the step-by-step process. Some of you might be close to completing that during class today, I don't know. But that's what I want to do. On Thursday, I want everybody to be able to share their Rhino model, and we can look at it together, get some feedback on it. Then over the weekend, I'll ask you to do 5 of these composition models. Okay, so you'll follow these steps 5 times. Okay, you can use this one from that we look at on Thursday as as one of those 5 models. But if you get feedback like, oh, you need to this part is great, but the back is like really boring, so you need to do something here and there and slide this apart or whatever, right? If you get any feedback like that, you can use that feedback, continue to tweak and adjust that model, and use that as one of your 5 if you'd like. Okay, but when it comes to what's due on Tuesday, right, next week, when we come back over the weekend, after the weekend, you'll actually submit a PDF or 5 PDFs, either a 5-page PDF or 5 one-page PDFs. I don't care what it is, right? We'll talk about that in Illustrator today and tomorrow. Like of the axon drawings. Okay, your first draft of axon drawings. Okay, so one model due tomorrow. We can just open it up in Rhino and look at it. You don't actually have to submit anything on Canvas. And then on Tuesday, after the weekend, you will have submissions due on Canvas, PDF format drawings. Okay, all right. So it's pretty exciting. We're gonna get this moving quick. All right. So we'll be looking at these models, and here's what I'm looking for when it comes to this sort of criteria for these models. Right? Is there spatial or volumetric variety? Right? If I look at these models, are there tall spaces and wide spaces? Are there spaces that fold into the next space? Right? Are there I always think about these things, and I always look at the scale of them, and I imagine a scale figure. And I'm good at this. I have like these tick marks engraved into my retina by now, right? To understand scale. It's almost like a ruler in my eyeballs, right? And you guys will have to develop that as you go too. But I always think about, placing scale figures in this to begin to understand scale and the sort of, thinking about humans. And what would it be like to be inside of this thing or on top of this thing or next to this thing? Okay. Formal interest, right? In other words, form or the shape, right? The overall form or shape created, do not think in terms of front, back, or top and bottom, but rather your planar composition should be interesting in the round from all sides, right? There's nothing worse than seeing a great piece of architecture and then looking at the back end of it, the back, and it's like, oh, that's terrible, right? Good pieces of architecture, I would argue, don't have a front and a back. Right? It's like when you want to leave Costco, but you have to drive behind it, and you see all the the dumpsters and all the pallets and crap. Yeah. All right. So following instructions, simply being able to perform all the steps. By the time we get to Tuesday, you've done this a couple of times, and so I think you should be pretty good at it now. Okay, making sure you just do things on time. Okay. Time management, those sorts of things. All right. So that's the agenda. And again, this is here, the first page in module 1. Okay. This project 1, oh, sorry, I guess it doesn't show up. It shows up for you different. Let's see. Go to student view here. Right. Please submit your axon drawings in PDF format. When you're ready to upload those, files, you can just say start the assignment. It'll allow you to upload those PDF files. Okay. It's already open now, so if you're all done, then you can submit them easily before Tuesday if you want. Leave the student view here. All right, so sorry, just letting Windows warm up here, I guess. Come on, Rhino. There we are. Just let it fire up here. While that's happening, any questions? Sorry, when I share my screen, the chat disappears. So tomorrow we only need one model completed, correct? Absolutely it is. All right, here's Rhino. Open it up. Look at that. I have two of them open. Interesting. Oh, it's because I double clicked it twice. All right, here we are. So a few things here, and I don't know if it looks the same on your screen, but on mine, I have some pull down menus. Those are important. Those come in handy from time to time. I have a command line. If I start to type something in my keyboard, sorry, this always happens as soon as I'm trying to do something in front of people. Nothing works. There we go. All right. I can start to type in my keyboard and it starts to, you can see it in this command line, right? So once you learn certain commands, you can start to type them with your left hand on the keyboard instead of having to move your mouse around across the screen a bunch. Let's say I want to copy or move or create a square or circle or something like that, okay? There's a set of tabs along here. I just leave mine in standard for right now. A set of tools or toolbar on the left-hand side, and then a window on the right-hand side. If your window isn't docked on the right-hand side, you can always move it over here until it highlights like that, and you can dock it over here, right? What you'll see is that there's properties tab, a layers tab, looks like a rendering tab, a materials tab. There's some other tabs that'll pop up from time to time. When you first open this up, there might be some sort of help tag or command tab that sort of tells you or shows you what commands are when you're starting to do that. When you start to select the command, and it sort of tells you what to do. Okay. As well, by default, I think I have 4 viewports here. So I'm looking in my Cartesian coordinate space from the top, from the front, from the right, and then in perspective view. Okay. I recommend having a mouse when you're doing anything with Rhino or Revit or Illustrator. It really does help. Photoshop as well. And so what I'm doing is if I use my right mouse button in the ortho views of top and front and right, I can pan, right? So I can move my screen around. Like it's a map or something, I'm just moving the map around. In the 3-dimensional view, the perspective view, the right mouse button lets me rotate my view. Sometimes you call this dollying the view or tumbling or rotating. You can see I have an X, a Y, and a Z axis, right? Just like back in the old days of algebra and geometry and all those other courses in high school and maybe college. Okay. If you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, right, you can zoom in and out by using that scroll wheel. It's really helpful. There are other zoom tools in here, right? So if I click this magnifying glass, I can click and drag up or down and zoom in or out, right? Similarly to how I use my scroll wheel on my mouse. And this can come in really handy sometimes, right? If I'm zoomed way in or if I'm zoomed way out, I just want to fit the screen around all the objects. I can say zoom and zoom around all the, or sort of bring all the objects and fit it into the window. Okay, so anyway, we'll go over these again and again. I don't expect you to remember all of this right away, right? That's why we practice. Practice is how you actually learn. All right. So we just talked a little bit about the mouse. Okay. There are also a few settings down here: grid snap, ortho, planar, O snap, smart track, gumball, record history. Okay, we'll talk about, I'm going to turn off grid snap. I'm going to make sure that that's not on. I'm going to turn on ortho. I'll turn on planar. I'll turn on O snap. You know, when I click on these and to enable them, I can sort of toggle them on or off, right? Ortho mode, planar mode, object snap mode, smart track mode, right? So right now mine are highlighted in blue, meaning that they're turned on. The ones that aren't turned on are just sort of generic gray with the rest of the interface. All right, so first things first, let's take a look at this space and let's define our units. All right, if you're actually sitting down and just writing or taking any kind of quick notes, this is the one thing to actually jot down on a piece of paper. If I go to the tools pull down and go to options, okay, see where my mouse is? Went to the tools pull down menu, options. And it brings up pretty much all the options in Rhino that I ever wanted to know, including units, right? So you'll see that there's a sort of listing of different types of options and settings you can tweak here in Rhino. And units is one of them. Okay, I think by default mine are already set to inches. By default, yours might be set to millimeters. If that's the case, then you want to set those model units to inches. You can go with decimal, or you can go with feet and inches. I don't really care. I'm going to stick with decimal for right now. And I'm just going to hit OK. It's really important once you do this, don't hit escape or accidentally hit cancel. You got to hit OK. And then all the changes that you've made are saved. All right. So again, first thing we want to do, it's the easiest thing to forget. And you start and you're like, oh no, which units am I using? But you go to tools pull down options, right? Tools pull down options, bring up that options box. And right now what we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that our units, our modeling units are set to inches. Okay. Don't have to worry about the tolerance right now. There's nothing that we're doing that we're going to 3D print and has to be totally watertight or anything. Okay. And then hit OK once you're done. All right. Now, let's see, inches and feet and inches. Oh, wait. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually set these to feet, a model in feet. I forgot. All right. So again, practice. We'll go back to tools pull down, options, bring up this Rhino's options box, set my model units to feet. And I'm actually going to use feet and inches. Why not? I'll use feet and inches. Right. What that means is in a command line, when I'm trying to make a line, I click the first point and it says, how long do you want to make it? I can say 20 and hit enter, and it'll be 20 feet. And if I want to say 20 feet and 4 inches, I can say 20 feet and then hit the tick mark for feet, and then hit 4, and then hit the double tick mark for inches, and then hit enter, and then it'll be 20 feet, 4 inches. Okay, so go ahead and hit OK. All right, we've set it to feet. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. Let's take a look at the next set of instructions, right? This is probably what you'd be doing as well, right? We need to draw a 40-foot by 40-foot square, right? We need to draw 4 of them, actually. We can draw 1 and then copy it over, or we can practice drawing it multiple times, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work on the XY plane. So I'm going to work in top view. You notice that there's 4 different viewports here, right? Sometimes I just want to see one at a time. Right? And let's say I just want to work in top view right now, as if it's like my desktop and I'm drawing this manually, right? With a pen and paper, right? I'm just going to go ahead and double click that label for the viewport. It says top. If I double click it, it toggles that to fill the whole screen. Now, once I want to go back to 4 viewports, I can just double click that again and it toggles back to 4 viewports. Let's say I wanted to look in perspective, right? I can toggle that and fill up the whole window, or I can double click it again and go back to 4 viewports. So I'm just going to do that with top view. All right, now let's take a look at this. We're going to draw. So let's take a look at the toolbar, right? There is actually a hierarchy to this toolbar. And it has everything to do with how you actually, I don't know, geometrically, the way the mathematics underline the way you model in Rhino. So we start up here with points, right? Points are the ingredients to make lines and curves and shapes, right? Lines and curves and shapes are the ingredients to make surfaces. Then surfaces are the ingredients to make solids. And then beyond that, we have tools for some of these geometries. You know, we can join them, explode them, trim them, split them, move them, rotate them, warp them, curve them, whatever it is, right? Scale them. Okay. So a bunch of geometric transformations, right? So here we are making geometry, and then we can also modify them down here. Okay. So first things first, right? Most of these icons are pretty indicative of what they actually do, right? For instance, this one looks like a point, and voila, if I click it, I can place a point, right? Instead of having to go back here and hit this button every single time, if I want to start making more points, just like with AutoCAD in the old days, I can right click and repeat the last command and start placing points everywhere I want. Okay. Now, I don't know why you'd want to place a bunch of points like that across your screen all willy-nilly. You go ahead and just select them and hit delete and delete them away. All right. But suffice to say, underneath that is things called polylines and things called control point curves. Okay, so I'll just briefly show you what these do. If I hit polyline, okay, you can always look at your command line and it'll ask you, okay, you want to create a polyline? All right, hotshot, give me the start point. And so now it's asking you to sort of click on the screen to make a start point. Now it asks for the next point of the polyline. Okay, it's going to ask me for the next point. I can click somewhere, or I could type in 40 in my command line and hit enter. Right? Now it's going to make a 40 unit, in this case 40 foot line, right? And now I just have to click which direction I want. Now, do you notice that it's only going up and down or sideways, like along the X or the Y axis? That's really handy, isn't it? Because part of the instructions that we're only going to be working in 90-degree increments, okay, in order to keep things, you know, from getting too crazy. And the reason it's doing that is because I have my ortho lock set. Okay, if I unlock my ortho, I can use any angle I want, but that ortho lock constrains things to 90-degree increments. I can change that to 45-degree increments or 30-degree increments if I wanted to, just a setting in here. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to make sure ortho is set, and now I can draw up. Okay. Now it's going to say, okay, the next point of the polyline, press enter on your keyboard when you're done drawing the polyline. Okay. So the next line, right? In other words, we're going to make a bunch of line segments all connected together as a polyline. Okay. So I'm going to type in 40 again, since I'm making a 40 foot by 40 foot square. Okay. Now I have 40 foot line segment. I just need to sort of click in the direction I want to place it. There we go. I'm going to do this one more time. 40 feet. Okay. I'm going to make sure my cursor is down and click. At this point, I can do 40 feet and just, you know, go over here in this direction. But look what happens when I just put my cursor close to this start point. It's actually picking up the point, right? It's actually saying, oh, you're really close to this point that you started with. Would you like to just snap to it, right? And that's because I have my object snaps on, okay? So this O snap, right? If I turn that off, you know, it won't let me find any of these points. But if I turn it on, then it's going to go, oh, are you looking for an endpoint? Because here's one, right? So as soon as I get close to one of these points, right, it starts to snap to them. And I can turn on different types of points to snap to, right? Midpoint. Try to find a midpoint of something, or an endpoint, or something perpendicular, or where two lines intersect, etc. Last but not least, because there's always multiple ways to do this, you know, I could just say I want to close polyline and just close this up now. And I could just click this option right here in my command line, See where my cursor is? Where it says next point of polyline, press enter when done. Sorry about that. I can just hit close and I'll just close it up. Okay. So there's multiple ways to do this. Now, let's just do this again. All right. I'm going to do this one more time. Watch. And then you try it if you're not already trying it. Just click, type in 40, right? Okay. Hopefully I'm constraining it to 90 degrees. Yeah. Right. Not accidentally snapping to a midpoint or something over here, right? Just want to make sure I'm drawing a box, 90-degree angles, a square, 40. Click, type in 40 and hit enter, and then click in the direction I want it. In this case, I'll snap. I'll just click right here. Right? As soon as it tells me that I'm snapping to that point, I can click and close it right up. All right. So how's that working out on your end so far? Hopefully it's working. Oh. All right. All right. Suffice to say, there is a copy command. And so I could just copy this over and over, but might not be too bad a practice to just do this a few times, 4 times, in fact, and just draw, right? So again, back to my polyline command, get my first point, type in 40 for the length. All right, and up here, 40, click, 40, enter on my keyboard, click, and then 40, enter on my keyboard, click. Okay. Oops, I think I hit 440. Well, that's not good. There, 40, it's probably better. Snap to that point. There we are. Ah, yeah, using the Mac version. Do you have ortho toggled on?
Do I have which on? I'm sorry.
Ortho.
Ortho.
Yeah.
So there we go at the top. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why they made the interface so different in the Mac version.
Yeah, it's very different.
You'll have settings over here each time you use a command. On the left hand side, there'll be a bunch of settings that come up.
Okay, I'm checking to see here.
So, Kate, that probably just means you're scaled in or you're zoomed in, right? If you're using your mouse button or if you're using your trackpad, you can zoom in and out, right? With your scroll wheel. If you are zoomed way in or zoomed way out and you just want to sort of fit everything to screen, right? There's this one here. It's called Zoom Extents. It's a magnifying glass, and then it has the 4 sort of extent corners around it. If I click that, then it sort of fits everything to the screen, zooms out so everything's in the picture. And it's Zoom Extents. Fit it in nicely here. All right. Now that we have these 4 boxes, what we need to do is start to, all right, I don't know, sorry, I'm getting my background noise downstairs. So sorry about that. Lost my train of thought. Next steps is we're gonna start to actually draw more detailed shapes, right? With some actual dimensions that aren't just squares, right? Is there a reason for the green and red line that is already on the screen? Are you talking about this? Yeah, these are just your axes. So this is the 0, 0 point. This is your x-axis and this is your y-axis. Yeah. It's the same thing here, right? So there's your y-axis in green, your x-axis in red. They aren't actually lines, they're just the environment you're modeling in. So. Then this grid is just, again, a visual cue. I can turn this grid off. In fact, I'm going to do that because I think it's visually distracting. It's very busy. And it makes it hard to see. It almost turns my screen gray. I don't like it. So again, I'm going to go to Tools, pull down, Options, and I'm going to go to the Grid option. I'm going to turn my grid off. I'll still keep my grid axes on for X and Y and Z, but I'm going to turn off my grid. It's just my own personal preference here. I just cannot stand that grid. It's just, ugh. All right. I would do, for the purpose of the demonstration, when I move ahead here. All right, so let's start to draw some of these shapes. I'm going to draw one that starts at this top left corner and goes down 4 feet, then goes over 4 plus 24 feet, so that'd be 28 feet, then over down 6 feet, then over 24, and then down until it hits this edge perpendicular, and then fills out the rest of the shape. All right. So I'm just going to draw that, and I'm going to try to move this so we can see this guide and we can still see what I'm doing here on the screen. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go back to my polyline tool. I'm going to make sure that my ortho's still turned on, right? Still toggled. Same with my O snaps, my object snaps, and I have endpoint selected. I'm going to go ahead and snap to this endpoint here. All right, now I needed to draw a 4-foot line. So I'm going to type in 4 in my keyboard and then hit enter. All right, now it's just asking me which direction do you want to snap this line to, draw this. So I'm going to go down and click. All right, now I said I need to go 4 feet plus 24 feet, so 28 feet in this direction. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 28 and hit enter. All right, now I can click. There we go. Now 6 feet. Type in 6 and hit enter. There's a 6-foot line. Just need to place it right there. All right, now 24 feet. 24 on my keyboard and hit enter. And so again, it'll take some practice. Okay. There's a little bit of muscle memory to remember when it comes to which buttons on your mouse you use and things like that. And also using your keyboard and your left hand and your right hand in tandem. Okay. Now I need to draw a 30-foot line so that this thing actually comes to an intersection here. What's interesting is that I can actually tell it to find where it intersects this, where it would theoretically intersect this. So I can just snap right there, which is perfect. I'm just going to snap to this corner and snap to this corner. And I'm just going to say close when I'm done. Okay. All right. And now I have, you can see a highlighted magenta when I select it, the shape, just like this. Right. So I'm going to do this one more time, but I'm just going to draw this smaller shape, right? This sort of upside down L. Again, they'll be similar. In this case, I don't actually have to type in any coordinates or measurements this time, because I can basically just snap to the geometry that's already there. See, I can snap to this endpoint and intersection point, just click, go around and just basically trace. And again, once I want to close this up, I can just hit close up here in the command line. Right. Now, when I try to select one of these, let's say I try to select that shape I just made, right? It's asking me, well, did you want to, like, there's 2 curves and they overlap, right? So did you want to select this curve or this curve, right? So it's asking me when it's a little ambiguous as to which thing I'm trying to select when I click on the screen with my cursor. It asks me, okay, well, which piece of geometry that you're really close to clicking on, which one did you actually want to select here? Okay, I'm just going to look at this for a moment and zoom out. What you'll notice, I think, I'm just going to click on, let's say, this larger shape, and I'm just going to click and drag it outwards to move it. And then this also the smaller shape is that I still have my original box, and I still have this this larger shape, and I also have this smaller shape. So I almost drew this box just as a little bit of construction geometry to help me draw these other weirder shapes, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. I don't need the overall square anymore, because what I'm going to use for my model are actually these two shapes. Right. So let's take a brief pause. I'm curious, how many of you right now are following along and it's working? And how many of you are following along and it's disastrous? Something quite not right. And how many of you are like, is it time to follow along yet, Josh? I'm willing to do so. Let me give it a stab at it. So to me, I would say let's take 5 minutes. And how's it going? Right? Like, is everybody able to sort of draw some of these shapes and to type in some coordinates or dimensions in the command line with the keyboard at the same time, right? So usually my left hand is on the keyboard, typing things in and hitting enter or escape afterwards. And then my right hand is on the mouse, left button, right button, scroll button to zoom in and out, right? So right mouse button, if I click and hold, I can pan, right? If I just right click once, it repeats the last command I did. In this case, create another line, a polyline. When I click my left mouse button, and there's no command active, then it's just my cursor. I can select things. Mine is set to highlight in magenta when I select it. Yours is probably by default the gray background and probably looks like it's yellow when you highlight it, select it, right? That'd be my guess anyway. Is anybody having big major problems? Okay, good. So I'm pretty confident now.
Well, real quick, Josh, I don't know, remember how you were able to split the two things apart.
So I didn't actually split
maintain that shape.
I didn't actually split anything yet. What I did is I drew the entire closed shape on the inside, and I drew another entirely closed shape on the inside. Then I basically just moved them away from each other. So let me just back up here. There we go. Right, so you can hopefully see this when I try this. Like I drew this shape. I'm just going to move it over to the side here, right? I drew this shape. I'll just move it over to the side here. And I drew those inside this other box that was closed, right, the square. So I didn't actually split anything. But you can select things and move them. In this case, I'm just selecting them and then just sort of clicking and dragging to move them across the screen. There are ways to move things more precisely with actual, like move this 20 feet to the east or something like that. We'll talk about that in just a minute. All right, so let me go ahead and make a few more here. All right, so here we have 4 feet. Then we'll go over, it looks like 12 plus 20, so 32 feet. And then down 26 feet, and then over 20 feet, and then down 10 feet. And then we'll complete this sort of C-looking shape here. All right, so start with my polyline. I'll snap to this top left-hand corner, click. All right, type in 4. I'm going to draw a 4-foot line. Make sure it's going down and click my mouse. Now I need to go over to the right 32 feet. So I'll go ahead and type in 32 and hit enter on my keyboard. Just want to make sure that I'm going to draw it to the right here and click. Now 26 feet, it looks like 26 and click. 20 feet, enter, and then click. And then down 10 feet, so I can just snap to where this would intersect the edge here. Click. And I'm going to go all the way around the edges, right? So I started up here. So in order to make this a nice closed shape, I'm just going to click to these corners. And then I'm going to finish it off by clicking here or hitting close. Okay. So there's a nice closed shape there. See, I highlighted magenta. And now I'm just going to draw this other smaller shape right here. Click, click, click. I'm just going to make sure I'm snapping around to the right points here, the right vertices, and hit close at the end. All right. All right, now, for the sake of this demonstration, I'm not going to do all of these because we need to move ahead here. But I am going to take these larger pieces and move them away from each other. Okay, so I'm just selecting them and then I'm just clicking and dragging them upwards. Here. Right, so I've done 2 of these squares. I've broken them up into the first step, right? So I have this shape and then this shape. Now I need to take this shape and then cut it in half, cut it into 2 pieces. I need to take this shape and cut it into 3 pieces, right? So there's a couple of different ways to do this. Yeah, I'm tracing them. I'm just tracing them. Yeah, it's a good point. Good way of putting it. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Liz's question was, you're just tracing the second pieces right after you draw the first piece. You're just going around and tracing the second piece. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to draw some cutting lines, and we're going to actually start to split our shapes up. All right, and then reclose them up into separate pieces. Okay, so I'm going to arbitrarily draw a line here to cut this shape into 2 pieces using this line. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I got to cut this one up into 3 pieces, it looks like, somehow. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here and here. Right, so I'll have 1, 2, 3 pieces. Okay. So the command I'm going to use is quite literally called split. It's handy to know. So split. I'm going to go to the split tool here, the split button, right, icon. And go ahead and use the split command. You can also type in split in the command line if you remember the word split. Okay. It's going to ask me, again, it's always going to ask me for the ingredients and then sort of direct me what it needs in order to complete the command. If you look at the command line. So first it asks, well, select the objects that you want to split into pieces. Okay, so I'm going to take this shape. I'm going to split that shape. And I'm going to right click or hit enter when I'm done. Okay. Now it says, okay, select the cutting objects. I'm going to select this line that I drew to cut this. Okay. And it says at the end, one curve was split into 2 pieces. And when I select one side or the other, right, I actually have 2 pieces, which is handy. I can go ahead and delete this cutting line. I just selected it and then deleted it. I'm just going to click and drag with my cursor and drag this away. You can see it's actually quite literally been split into 2 pieces. And now what I want to do is I just want to make another set of, use the polyline tool and click and click, snap to these ends, and just close these shapes up again, right? So now I have 1 piece became 2 pieces to work with for my model. Okay. Let's do this again, but this time I'll do it on this piece, right? I'm going to split. It asked me to select the object to split. I'm going to split this closed shape that I drew. Okay, once I'm done selecting any of the objects I want to split, I'm going to hit enter. Okay. Now it says to select the cutting object or objects. In this case, I'm going to select this one and start to cut this up or split it into pieces. I'm going to hit enter. It says, okay, 1 curve split into 4 pieces. So we have that piece, and we have that, and we have that, and we have that. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and, oops. I'm just going to select this and hit delete. Select that and hit delete. All right. I'll go ahead and move this one up here. I'm just going to click and drag to move these things away. Right. We basically just need to close these things up again. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back to my line tool, polyline tool, snap to the endpoint here, click, click, hit enter when I'm done. Click, click, hit enter when I'm done. Click, click, hit enter when I'm done. Click, click, hit enter when I'm done, right? Now these aren't closed or joined together anymore. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these at once. I'm just going to hit this join tool. It's these two puzzle pieces that look like they're being joined together. Okay. When I do that, it's going to say, oh, there was 12 open curves and they've been joined into 5 closed curves, which is handy, right? I can do it all at the same time. Now this is one closed curve. This is one closed shape, one closed shape, one closed shape, one closed shape. Okay. All right.
I just tried that and it said unable to join the curves. Is there like a trouble? Should I just wait until like troubleshooting later to do that, or do you know something right now?
My suspicion there, Brent, is if you go back to, let's say, your perspective or side view, my guess is that these things aren't on the same plane somehow. That's typically what happens. Either that or they weren't quite snapped together. And so they're either they're gapped or they just slightly extend past each other at a corner. Okay.
Oh, okay, I see it. Never mind. Got it.
Yeah. And that's easy to do. It's easy. That happens a lot. You gotta be careful. It takes a little bit of again, muscle memory, sort of understanding what the problems for troubleshooting would be as well. But that's the most common thing I see. Either they aren't on the same plane, like let's say in the XY plane, or there's just a small indiscrepancy, in one of those vertices. Something's not quite aligned. All right, I'm going to speed things up just a little bit here and get through this for the recording. Okay. So that way you'll have something, so that way we can look at the models tomorrow, each of your models, your first stab at it. And again, if you're having issues, then try to get as far as you can, and then be prepared to talk about what the issues or problems you had, right? Because we can take tomorrow to troubleshoot and to go a little further, okay, with the instruction, the demonstration. But so I'm going to go ahead and toggle back to my 4 viewports. I'm going to go ahead and use this zoom extents. I'm just going to, sort of get everything into my viewports here at the same time. You can see my pieces, but all of these are just, they're just lines, there's just space, air in between. And so what I'm going to do is actually make these into surfaces and then give them thickness so that they're actually solids, right? As if they were materials made out of like steel or wood or paper or something, okay? All right. So we'll go over more of these surfacing tools, but if you click and hold on this icon right here, there's a number of different ways to create surfaces from basically curves. Okay. And we're going to use one called extrude. Okay. Extrude is a fun word that we probably heard over and over again, right? So a lot of these have a sort of analog manufacturing sort of metaphor in mind, right? Like when you think of an extrusion, you think of it in a shape that's been extruded along a direction, right? Like extruded plastic, extruded aluminum, or other sort of parts where you have a cross section that's consistent and has been sort of stretched along a direction, right? And so that's essentially what we're going to do here. Right? I'm going to go ahead and type in the command extrude curve. Okay. You can see once I start to type in a command, it tries to IntelliSense, okay, you're trying to type in extrude. So do you want to extrude curve? Do you want to extrude mesh? Do you want to extrude surface? I'm just going to go ahead and let it do extrude curve, okay? Extrude curve. Select the curves to extrude. I'm going to go ahead and select all of these at once. Okay, so I'm just going to click and drag a box around all of these, right? And once they're all selected, they'll all turn a color, like I think mine's magenta. I think yours is probably yellow by default. Okay, when I'm done selecting, I'm going to hit enter. All right, and now it's saying, oh, how far do you want to extrude these and in what direction? Okay, now I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to go slow. And if you need to look this up in the recording later, this is why I'm taking my time here. In the perspective viewport label, see where it says this label, it says perspective, and then there's a little arrow here. If I click on that arrow, it gives me a menu. I'm going to go turn this to shaded so I can sort of see, surface. where I'm drawing surface. Okay, so you can see what I can do is I can move it up or down, and it's going both in the up and down direction a certain distance and extruding it and creating surfaces, in these shapes, right? Almost like blocks, right? So I'm going to look at my options up here in the command line. And first things first, I notice that both sides is set to yes. And I'm going to say no. So I toggle that, I click it, and it's going to say no. Now it's just going to let me go in one direction or the other, right? And since we drew in the XY plane and the default direction for extrusion is in the Z-axis, that actually lined up pretty nicely. There's a reason I did that is so we didn't actually have to worry about trying to change the direction of the extrusion here. But you can see every time there's you run a command in the command line, it'll ask you for the ingredients that it needs to run, and they'll give you some of the settings or parameters that you can adjust, right? Solid, output direction, both sides, solid. You can see there's an option called solid. Mine is set to equal no. If I click on that, it toggles it to yes, meaning that it'll actually cap the bottom and the top as well. So it's not just going to extrude that shape, but it's also going to put a top and a bottom on it to make it a solid. Okay. And last but not least, it's asking me for an extrusion distance. And so if I type in 1, like for 1 foot on my keyboard, and hit enter, I'll have extruded them 1 foot or 12 inches. Okay. All right, so let me blow up my perspective viewport. You can see the results, right? I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Let's do it one more time, okay, for the demonstration. Okay, first, the command to remember is extrude curve. So I'm going to type in extrude. It's going to ask me, well, do you want to take a surface and extrude that, or a curve and extrude that? I'm going to say extrude curve. CRV is short for curve. Surf, SRF is short for surface. But I'm going to do extrude curve here. And it says, okay, well, first you need to select the curves that you want to extrude. That makes sense. So again, I'm going to go ahead and select, drag a box and select all of these. I could click them one by one if I wanted to. Once I'm done selecting all the curves I want to extrude, I can press enter. Okay. All right, now I have a set of options here. I'm going to make sure that in this case, both sides is set to no and solid is set to yes, right? Once I put my cursor, my mouse over each of these settings, right, they turn blue like they're a hyperlink, and I can toggle them by clicking them, no or yes. So both sides no, solid set to yes. Okay. And then last, it's asking for an extrusion distance. So I can type in that distance. Since I'm modeling in feet, I want to extrude these 1 foot, I can just type in 1. Okay. Now it's just going to ask me which direction, right? So I'm just going to move my mouse so that it extrudes upwards and hit enter on my keyboard. And cutting them into the pieces is up to you, yes. Right, so you just need to cut them into 2 pieces or 3 pieces or 4 pieces according to the instructions. But where you actually do that is up to you. You're talking about this step here. Yeah. All right. So I've gone ahead and extruded these into solids, and now it's time to try to assemble them together. Okay. Again, I'm just going to bring up the instructions. First of all, it says I'm supposed to be working within a 60-foot by 60-foot by 60-foot cube shaped envelope. Okay. So I'm going to probably make that first so that I have like a sort of shape that I can work inside of and understand, where, I don't go outside of the bounds, etc. Right? Like I can sort of, define that area so that it's easier to work within. Okay. Again, there's a couple of different ways to do this, but let's practice making square or drawing a shape and then extruding it into a solid. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use my polyline tool. I'm going to go ahead and snap somewhere close to the 0, 0 point here. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually see where it says start a polyline. I can snap or click somewhere on my screen to set that point, that start point, or I could literally type in comma 0, comma 0, comma 0, right? As if it's like a piece of graph paper in algebra where you had to like graph curves. Oh, it's such a pain, right? I could type in 0, 0, 0, and have it start at that 0, 0, 0 world coordinate axis point. That's what I'm going to do in this case. I'm going to go ahead and type in 60 for the length. Go ahead and click 60, 60, enter on the keyboard, and then click with my mouse, and then close this up by hitting the C there. Now I can extrude, curve. Select the curves to extrude, will be this one. Both sides no, solid yes. Extrusion distance, well, this is going to be a cube, so 60 feet. All right. Now it's not so easy to see through this, it's opaque. So again, I'm going to go to my perspective label and see this pull down menu where we set things to shaded. I can also set things to ghosted or X-rayed. And now I can start to actually see through, right? It starts to give you a translucent set of surfaces so you can actually sort of see through things. And you can still see that there are surfaces here, but they're not completely opaque. So it's a little more helpful when it comes to modeling. All right, so a couple of things I'm going to do here. I'm going to get rid of all my curves, right? I still have the curves that I extruded, that I drew originally underneath all these extrusions, right? I don't want to mess around with these curves anymore. I have the extruded solids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the curves in my model and just hit delete, okay? And the way to do that is by typing in, quite literally, select curves. And there's a shortcut here. It's called SEL, short for select, and then CRV, short for curve. So cell curve, right? Up in my command line, SEL, CRV. I'll select all the curves in my model that are on right now, and I can go ahead and hit delete and then get rid of those. I'm going to go back to my 4 viewports. I'm actually going to turn each of them to ghosted, I think, or X-ray, one or the other, depending on what you prefer. So I can see these things. Go ahead and fit everything in the screen here and on my viewports. A couple of things. I'm going to go to, let's see, that's y-axis. Okay. I'm going to go to my right-hand view, and I'm going to tilt a few of these up. Okay, so you can see in perspective, I'm selecting this piece and this piece. You can see that they're highlighted magenta. And then in my right viewports, I'm going to go ahead and rotate these to tilt them up so they'll become vertical. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and type in the command rotate. It's going to ask me for a few parameters here. First, it's going to ask me for the center of rotation. I'm going to go ahead and snap to a point along this piece here that I'm about to rotate. And it's going to ask me for an angle or a first reference point. Okay, I'm going to do this a couple of times and show you how you can use an angle or you can use a reference point. So if I type in 90 degrees for an angle, right, it's going to rotate those up 90 degrees in my right-hand viewport, right? And so you can see what it did. Right now, those are vertically, they're standing up vertically. Right? I could also, I'm just going to right click and repeat the command, center of rotation. Instead of using an angle, I can say reference point. So I can go ahead and snap over here, and then I can move my cursor and tell it where I want to rotate it. And since I have my ortho on, I can rotate it only in 90-degree increments. Now I'm going to take 1 or 2 pieces here, two other pieces. I'm going to go into my front view, and I'm going to rotate those upwards too. I'll go ahead and snap here maybe, and I'll go ahead and click here as a reference and then tilt them upwards. All right, now I have some parts that are on the XY plane, parts that are on the XZ plane, parts that are on the YZ plane, okay? So I use the command rotate, literally just typing in the word rotate in the command line, right? Then it asks me for the objects to rotate, then asks me for the point to rotate about, and then it asks me for how much to rotate, right? I can click and click to tell how much to rotate, or I can type in a 90 degrees or 180 degrees in order to tell how much to rotate. Last but not least, I'm going to use the actual move command by typing in the word move. Okay, select the objects to move, and I'm just going to select like this object. Now it's going to ask me, okay, point to move from and point to move to, right? So this is important. I'm going to pick and snap one of these corners, and I'm going to click and snap to a corner from another piece over here that I want to attach to. All right, I'll do it again. Move. Right. I'll select this object, hit enter. I'm going to snap to the midpoint here. Why not? Into the midpoint, or maybe this point over here. All right. Now I've gone outside my 60-foot by 60-foot box, so maybe I select all of these at once. I'm going to hit and move, and I'm just going to slide them over until they fit within my box. Okay, do it again. I'm going to move. Let's see here. I'm going to take this one up to this topmost edge here. All right. Now I want to take this and I'm actually going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to go in a top view and I'm going to type in rotate. I'm going to rotate this. Center of rotation. I'll just pick the center here. I'll type in 90 and hit enter. All right. Now I'm going to move this into place. I have something in mind here. I'm going to try to snap this to this. See if I can bridge over to this part here. Yeah, maybe that'd be kind of interesting. Right, and so what I'm doing is I'm slowly composing this stuff together. Once I'm done with this cube, right, I can go ahead and delete it. Now I'm not using all of the pieces that you will have, right? And you know, at the same time, I'm just sort of really quickly going through the steps here, right? But I'm just trying to give you a sense of what this involves, okay? Step by step, how to do it. So from here, all the pieces are in place. It's just a matter of like moving them and composing them into some sort of really interesting organization. Let's see here. Oh, I see. So I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Sometimes it helps to zoom in, right? I'm just using that scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in and out at will. Once you develop the muscle memory to remember my right mouse button, I can rotate my view around, right? So I can get into a really tight corner and sort of look and make sure things are actually aligned and snapped in places where they need to be. Let's see here. I feel it's almost cheating not having the right number of pieces here because this is pretty lame. I like double the amount of pieces I should have. Liz is like, yep, lame. Lame with a capital L. All right, that's fair. Maybe I'll move this away. Yeah. Maybe I don't want this to sit on the very edge here, right? So if I want to move this upwards, right now it's my construction plane and perspective is the XY plane. And so it really only wants to let me move in the X and Y axis with my ortho on. So if I want to move it up, I can actually just go to one of my side views, front or right, and then move it up or down. And again, very precisely, if I wanted to move it 4 feet, let's say, right, I could click 4 and then, or type in 4 with my keyboard and then click and move it up 4 feet, right? Or however much you want to move it. Okay. All right, so really quickly, before I stop recording and we can troubleshoot some things, let's take a look at some of these examples, right? I picked these because, you know, for instance, they come out and touch at least 3 edges of that 60 foot by 60 foot cube, but there's no like one just sort of like flat planar side, right? In other words, there's interest all the way around. I could probably turn any of these upside down or around, and you know, you would sort of focus your eyes, and then you wouldn't know that there was a top and a bottom, right? Okay, and so that's one way to sort of think about these, right? Is it just as interesting from this vantage point as it is from this vantage point, right? As I start to move around it. Okay. You'll have many more pieces here to deal with, but suffice to say, but right. So tomorrow, I want you to try your best to do this step by step, one time, make a model, and we're going to, and then you're each going to give us a tour in Rhino, right? So, and then you'll get a little bit of feedback. We can troubleshoot any problems. We'll take this 1 or 2 steps further with how to generate an axon, okay, and bring that into Illustrator for Tuesday. And then you'll do 5 of these over the weekend, okay? So tomorrow, just 1 of these, try your best, and know that it'll be show and tell. And if you're having some difficulties with something, then it'll also be some debugging, okay? All right. Where this is going eventually, right, it's easier to model things that are non-standard in Rhino, but then in Revit, we'll actually start to place and delineate these as concrete walls, curtain walls with glass, metal panel walls, and things like that, with, you know, other things that are delineated as grids. And then we'll bring them back into Rhino and start to generate drawings from them. So we'll be going back and forth and learning how to sort of fluidly move from platform to platform without losing fidelity of your geometry, right? So it's always about, you know, how I use my speed square and my pencil and my saw together in harmony, right? The same thing with software. Software is just a set of tools, and it's a lot easier to just sort of figure out how to move back and forth between Rhino and Revit and Photoshop than it is to just try to do everything in Revit or try to do everything in Rhino. It's real pain. So, all right. Okie dokie. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And then we have just a little bit of time for any quick questions. So go ahead and stop sharing and stop recording.